Yesterday, I posted my unboxing and first impressions video for the brand new Pixel 10 Pro Fold. And in that video, I did do just a very brief look at the camera by taking a handful of photos and kind of showing those to you guys in that video. But today we're going to dig quite a bit deeper. I have grabbed my Pixel 9 Pro Fold. I have grabbed my Galaxy Z Fold 7 and I've taken a bunch of pictures and we're going to kind of see how they compare and contrast. As I'm sure many of you probably already know, the camera system on the 10 Pro Fold has not really changed a whole lot. They did change the primary sensor, but it's a primary sensor that is very similar. So you wouldn't necessarily expect to see huge differences between the 9 and the 10 Pro Fold, but I think you'll be surprised at how many differences there actually are as Google adjusts processing. So this first shot was taken with a 2x digital crop, and I just want you to pay attention to the color reproduction first and foremost here on the 10 Pro Fold versus the 9 Pro Fold. I think there's a very obvious difference. The 10 Pro Fold, I think, has a punchier and more contrasty look, but also that Pokeball is more of a cherry red than on the 9, and I think that it looks more accurate. When we go to the Galaxy Z Fold 7, we've kind of lost the plot a little bit. While I do like the look of a larger sensor with a larger aperture, you can see the shallow depth of field, like we're already getting blurry right there, and obviously much more blurry in the background compared to the pixels. The color reproduction is a little bit off, and this is kind of a challenging situation because the red of that Pokeball, and it's a little bit in like a lower light scenario, but still something to notice. I will point out though that the detail among all three look pretty good. I do think that the 10 Pro Fold maybe has a little bit of like an over sharpened look for me. It's not dramatic, but when you compare it to the 9, I do think, again, we're seeing some changes to their algorithm. Here's another challenging shot taken on the 1X. Here is your 10 Pro Fold. Here is your 9 Pro Fold. And here is your Galaxy Z Fold 7, which has a bit more of a magenta shift to the colors just a little bit. Also, again, noticing that shallow depth of field. I think that all three have a very similar amount of detail. The 9 Pro Fold went a little bit warm. The Fold 7 went a little bit maybe cool, maybe slightly magenta, and I think that the 10 Pro Fold held things the most natural. Stepping outside, looking at this dogwood tree, I think that the 9 and the 10 both look almost completely identical. I would not be able to pick these out. And the Fold 7 is kind of pumping up that green just a little bit. But here's the thing. Looking at this with my human eyes in real life, I kind of feel like the Z Fold is a bit closer to accurate. Sometimes these later Pixel devices have kind of muted colors more than they ought to be. Yes, it is October the 10th, but these leaves are still very green right now. I always like taking photos of roses because I think that the color reproduction is always very interesting. Here is your 10, here is your 9. Again, I mean, if you can see a difference, then good for you. I don't think that I can. And then here is your Fold 7, again, kind of pumping up those colors a little bit more. In this instance, I do think that they probably have gone just a little bit too far because these are starting to look a little bit faded and this green is maybe a little bit too punched up. You might like the look of that. I think based on how a lot of you have reacted to the Find N5 and the Honor Magic V5 photos and comparisons like this, a lot of you will probably prefer this slightly punched up photo. Here is a shot in a very challenging scenario, some weird and low lighting. Bushy the Lion, an old Beanie Baby from my from my childhood that I bought again relatively recently. Here's your 10. Here is your 9. Looking a little bit washed out, a little bit blown out, kind of an odd result. And then here is your Fold 7, which is definitely a bit punchier, a bit more contrast, and definitely a more shallow depth of field. I would say between this and the 10, you have two very comparable shots. Stepping outside into some low light, all three of these look remarkably similar, with the only real difference being that once again the Z Fold has a little bit more color in the shot. Going back to the 9 and back to the 7, hopefully you can see that difference. It's minor, it's not a lot, but it is there. So when it comes to that primary camera, there's really not like a radical difference, okay? Like if you said to me, Shane, you're going to have to use one of these three primary cameras for the next 6 months or a year, whatever it might be, I'm not going to be all that upset with you. I do like the fact that I have a bit more control with sort of filters and things in the camera app on the Fold 7 to get things the way that I want them to look. I also do like that shallow depth of field. I kind of do lean slightly towards the Fold 7 in terms of having it's like the colors are instead of being at 0, they're like 1 or 1.5. They're not quite doing like what Oppo does, where it's a little bit too far. They're not over sharpening. They're just a hair turned up. And I think that that's perfectly fine. But I have no problem with the Fold 10 or the Fold 9, 9 Pro Fold, 10 Pro, whatever you want to call them. I have no problem with either one of those. But now we need to talk about zoom performance, and things get really interesting here. So what I did first is a 3x crop. Now on the 10, obviously, like I said, that's a crop. There is no 3x sensor. Let's zoom in. We're going to use these little controllers as our sort of benchmark because there's multiple colors on it, and you can see the lettering there on the controller. There's your 10. Here is your 9. Now this is interesting because the 10 looks significantly better than the 9. Did not expect this because there's not really a reason in the sensor to make me think that's going to happen. This is just improved processing. So score a point for the 10. We go to the Z Fold 7, and I think obviously you do have the most detail, but Samsung in particular, zooming in low light, they tend to leave in quite a bit of noise. Now this shot is a 5x zoom. We're using the 5x sensor on the Pixel 10 Pro Fold, and I think that this result does look pretty solid. Not an overly large amount of noise. Again, this is kind of in a low light situation. On the Pixel 9 Pro Fold, we're back to looking, to my eye, basically identical. And now with the Fold 7, we're taking our 3x sensor and we're digitally cropping in. And something funny happens that Samsung does when you do that digital crop. They pump up the noise reduction. And I actually think that this turned out looking pretty good. I mean, I don't think it's quite as good as the 5x sensor on either of the Pixels, but man, is it really, really, really close. It kind of makes me wish that they would do a bit more noise reduction just at standard 3x. And now to push things, we've stepped back again and we've gone up to 10x. You can see some noise kind of happening here on the 10 Pro Fold. But again, I think detail looks relatively okay. The word reset, not really legible anymore. On the 9 Pro Fold, it's really, really similar. Did the colors change at all? No, they look pretty much the same to me. And then on the Fold 7, it's starting to really struggle. The details are starting to fall off. Stepping outside into some better lighting and once again going to a 3x optical zoom, we can see some interesting changes here between the Fold 10, the 10 Pro Fold, and the 9 Pro Fold. Details aren't particularly great. This is a digital crop to be expected. Look at the 9 though. Look at the color reproduction. Look how much warmer this is. This is unrealistically warm. So again, the 10 Pro Fold gets an advantage when it comes to color reproduction. At 3x though, the best shot is far and away going to be that Fold 7. And I think that that, kind of hammers this home. How much do you use mid-range zoom, 3x, 4x, versus 5x and beyond? That's going to make a big difference. Let's look at 5x now. This is 5x on the 10 Pro Fold, and now we've shifted a little bit warmer than I think is accurate. The 9 Pro Fold, maybe even warmer than that. Am I crazy? Does that look even warmer? Detail looks great on both. And then cropping into 5x on the Fold 7, you get this shot, which I think is more accurate in terms of colors. And let's be honest, I think detail looks pretty darn good. In fact, let's kind of get a good look at little Blue's face here. And then let's go back to the 10 Pro Fold and zoom in. I think that that's really comparable. So zoom is kind of complicated, right? Because at 3x, in particular in good lighting, I think you have to give it to the Fold 7. When you go to 5x, the Fold 7 is still holding its own. Anything above 5x, it's just getting destroyed at that point because it just does not have a good enough sensor to be doing that. So what about the ultra-wide camera? I think this is a very well-balanced shot. You have a light source over here, a light source over here, some shadow in the middle, and I think that it's handling this very, very well. Detail looks absolutely fine to me. The Pixel 9 Pro Fold looks very similar, but hey, what's happened to the white balance here? The white balance has kind of gone a little bit crazy. Look how much warmer this looks. This is inaccurate. So that's definitely a problem. On the Z Fold 7, I think that this looks pretty darn solid as well. But again, kind of what's happening with Samsung phones right now. They leave in a bit more noise than you might want to see. And I think that they're doing this because it does, sometimes when you denoise too much, you lose some details. So I think they're trying to find a balance, and I wish that they would lean a little bit more towards noise reduction. But I think that again, between these three, probably the 10 Pro Fold looks the best. Stepping outside, I think that again, between the 10 Pro Fold and the 9 Pro Fold, the Ultrawide looks virtually identical. The Galaxy Z Fold 7 looks really, really similar as well. A color reproduction changes just a hair, but honestly, in this instance, kind of funny. Look at this barn back here. Look at the color red on the 9 Pro Fold and the 10 Pro Fold, and then look at the Z Fold 7. It actually, to my eye, looks a little bit more muted. So maybe some processing, color reproduction inconsistencies, but I think all three ultra wides are more than passable. When it comes to video performance, there's not a huge difference between the 10 Pro Fold and the 9 Pro Fold. It does look like the 10 Pro Fold's color reproduction. It's a little bit more saturated. Pay attention to the pink of that Pixel 9 device. It seems like it's more pink on the 10. For me, I'm probably going to continue assuming and thinking that the Galaxy Z Fold 7 has better video. In fact, of all the foldables I've tested, it's right there at the top. The Magic V5 is right there with it. I think that it's got a leg up over what Google has. They really need to kind of work on their video performance. It's not bad. It's just also not very different from last year. Let's talk about portraits for just a brief moment. Between the 9 and the 10, as I keep saying a lot in this video, there's really not a big difference at all. When you get to the Fold 7, I do want to give them some credit here for how they seem to be able to handle flyaway hairs. That is actually really, really impressive that those aren't blurred out. Let's go back to the 10 or the 9, and you can see that that is just gone, right? It's just gone. There's a really harsh cutoff. Look at all those hairs being lost. Samsung they're just better at portrait mode as far as I'm concerned. Their focus fall off, their bokeh looks more natural. I think that it's just better. Portrait mode, taking a photo of old man Rutherford here. We have the 10 Pro Fold. We have the 9, which actually did the bokeh a bit differently. It might just be the way that I framed it. Probably that's the case. And then you have the Galaxy Z Fold 7. Again, I just like the way that their portraits look better. I think that they're just kind of more pleasing to my eye. So as best I can tell, comparing that 9 Pro Fold to the 10 Pro Fold, I do think that they have improved things just a little bit. Not really with detail, but mostly with that reproduction of color, white balance, things like that. Video looks basically the same. Zoom looks basically the same. Although I should say 2x zoom did look better to me, which is weird, and I don't know why that is the case. So is the 10 Pro Fold camera better than the 9 Pro Fold camera? I think almost certainly the answer is going to be yes for most of you. How is it compared to the Fold 7? Well, now we're getting into really subjective territory. How much does a little bit of noise in the shadows bother you? Do you like your colors to be, like I said, instead of being at 0, being 1 or 1.5? How important is video to you? How important is 3x zoom versus 5, 6, 7x zoom? That's all very, very subjective. For me, like I said, I will be happy with either one of these camera setups. I think that they're both absolutely fine. 10 is a little better than the 9. 10 versus Fold 7. It's just going to come down to situations and subjective preference. Guys, let me know what you thought about all this in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more content like this, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.